G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and even better, it is a Friday, so I hope that you've got a fantastic weekend lined up. Get some rest, have some fun, have a beer, however you choose to spend it. Now, we have a lot to go over. I know I say that every day, but today we actually do have a lot, and I'm going to add something in at the end of this video. Now, I expect this video, like a lot of mine, will actually be restricted, as some of the clips I'm going to use in the end, YouTube didn't like. Not because they show anything, because I'm talking about chemical weapons with an expert. And this is what we hear a lot about chemical weapons at the moment. And I'm yet to see any of the mainstream typical media who have infinite budgets and 50 people on the roster actually speak to an expert on how do these weapons work, how are they being employed, what are they doing, and what does the law actually say about this. And they didn't like that when I did this a few months ago, so this video probably has 3 views, 1 comment, and is down the toilet. That is okay. But so we're going to talk about chemical weapons today in length. We're going to look at a number of strikes against Russian and Ukrainian air defense systems, as well as some other videos that have come out of suspected hits. Of course, we're going to have a look at the maps, look over the maps, sorry, see where things are advancing or not. We're going to talk about the peace summit in Switzerland at a 5-star lodge that Russia has not been invited to, and we don't know if China's coming yet, so it might just be a vista hangout in the spa. And we're going to look at, of course, Macron from France speak about French troops going into Ukraine and how he sees this still on the table as a possibility, as that stirred everything up before, although we do know that France could still supply a lot more weapons systems and everything into Ukraine before troops. And is this just trying to get votes as his popularity does decline? So let's speak about chemical weapons. Now, at the end, we're going to have the large breakdown of this with my good friend Andrew, who is a veteran, very, very experienced, and has worked in this specific field. Now, chemical weapons, are they illegal? Yes. Does it matter that what we're seeing used, K-51 riot control grenades? No. Chlorpyrifos, the active chemical in this, is specifically outlined, cannot use it. Now, people will argue about that. I'll let you argue about it, but any chemical being used, any gas, I think is a very, very slippery slope that we don't want to start going down. Now, I will add as well, and Andrew also adds this, that yes, it's a riot agent, but unless the area is tested immediately after we see this cloud of puff, well, we don't actually really know what is in that canister. So you have all of this to look forward to after. But the ICC, they should be the ones enforcing this. And we have seen that the International Criminal Courts, they have no jurisdiction in Russia. Of course, they put out warrants for senior people, including Putin. And they're not prepared, obviously, to investigate an American ally. Only this week, we saw the US and the G7, of which they're part of, has warned the ICC about investigations regarding Israel and President Netanyahu, warning against the legitimacy and jurisdiction. So we'll look at this. I know we reported on this. I'm not sure we reported on here or we did on the thing, on Telegram. You should come and join. But saying we don't support it, we don't believe that they have the jurisdiction. Such lawless action would undermine this interest, unprecedented for diplomats, and a fatal blow to judicial and moral standard of the ICC. So if then the G7, the West, if you want to say, America is saying that they don't have the jurisdiction or legitimacy here, well then why should other countries hold that to any jurisdictional legitimacy either? So there's a big play in this. But Google today, everyone in the last couple of days has been talking about this. US accuses Russia of chemical weapons, Russia, chemical weapons, blah, blah, blah. All of this. We've seen this bloody everywhere. And Kev Independent has quoted this article here talking about chlorpyrifos. Now, this is, like I said, the active chemical in the K-51 grenades are being dropped. It's often used as herbicide. It may be, I'm not a farmer, but it's more often, well, no, maybe not more often used, but chlorpyrifos is the chemical that is used in CS gas or tear gas. I'll put here just like ivermectin for horses. Yes, it may be dual use, but it's also used in this as well. Chemical weapons banned on the 1997 Chemical Weapons Convention, CWC, which Russia is signatory. Ukraine is also a signatory a year later in 1998, I believe. Use of chemicals is not an isolated incident. You'll see dislodged from fortified positions. So, of course, we know everywhere is fortified. Breaking it down with artillery with typical weapons is very hard. It doesn't flow in like chemicals, gas. So what is happening is these are being dropped. The gas is going in. This is a less than lethal agent. It causes a lot of irritation. And then you'll get that, oh shit, I've been hit with this a couple of times. And then you run out and then lethal force will hit you. So these articles have been everywhere, but it is important that we need to point out both Russia and Ukraine are signatories to the CWC. And there's evidence of both Russia and Ukraine using this. Now, why is there not too much footage? I'm about to show you some. But I would say that troops are under very strict instruction not to let any footage of this happening go online. And I'd say that the MODs will definitely strive to keep it hidden. But we do have some. Now, one thing I will point out from the footage I see, it does seem more systemic used by the Russians, but there is still use and evidence used by Ukraine as well. So you're actually going to see this footage later on if you watch the rest of the video, but we can see this was posted from the Russians here, a self-confessed one of Russian pages saying they're using the K-51s. I can't show you this because it has a lot in it. Then we see the 10th Mountain Brigade from Ukraine. They posted this on their social medias. You can see here as it drops. That is clearly a K-51, a Soviet canister there. And as it hits, you can then see no explosion and then the smoke then pouring out of these and then followed by troops then leaving the position. We also have, my friend pointed out, and you'll see this later as well, an English-speaking soldier here showing ammunition, and then on the desk are K-51s. So this is happening. We know it's happening, but what I'm saying is none of this should be accepted. It is a horrible thing. It leads us down a very, very bad path. And the Human Rights Watch, the ICC, all these countries, regardless of where their political stance is, should be calling it when they see it. And it is a horrible, horrible thing. Now, let's have a look over some strikes. So we do have a fair bit here. Now, we do have some updated strikes as well from this airbase, which is down in Crimea, that we did have rumors was hit by attackers from Ukraine, but nothing came out of it. Well, Svoboda Radio has published these satellite images that show at least one S-300 or S-400 system. We know there's a big difference for Russia's ability to replace those systems, but that a launcher was either damaged or destroyed. Now, this is down in Crimea, and this happened on April the 30th, and then all the systems were moved. As we see, I was pointing out systems here. This is clouds, so that's a shadow. And then we can see as it zooms in, there is something smoking here and here. Again, can't really get good footage of what that is. Yesterday, we then spoke about that Ukraine is looking to limit satellite imagery over Ukraine. I wonder if that will be just Ukraine or the occupied territories of Ukraine as well. That'll be very interesting. I don't think that has any effect on Russia's ability to target things, as they've got their own satellites. China has their own. I think it will just have a huge effect on the Aussie community, which of course can help push narratives around. Now, we spoke about those attackers, and people have spoken about these further, saying this. So this is from the former officers of the Security Service of Ukraine and now advisor to Ukraine's Parliament National Security. So, as we know, the Russians are able to adapt in a very short period of time. I think we have about 2 months to eliminate as many war objects as is possible before the Russians adapt. And he was talking specifically about the attackers in that. And this comes of exactly what we spoke about yesterday from this that was published through the Congress, that the Excalibur precision artillery rounds, of course using GPS as well, initially had a 70% efficiency rate, and in 6 weeks declined to 6%. and now we don't really hear anything about them. So we know there is a quick adaptation to this, and what he's saying is they need to strike them as soon as possible to have that effect. Now, there has been a lot of air defense being hit. That Russia has hit a Ukrainian RST SAM system in the Kharkiv region. We have this video here. We can see these troops walking around here. Skip forward, and we see this same area and a large strike on that there, saying it's destroyed. 2 strikes saying it has destroyed. Then RST air defense. We know air defense is incredibly necessary in this war for both Ukraine and Russia, and Ukraine has a huge shortage of it. Now, in the said to be the Kursk Oblast, so up here in Russian territory, a Ukrainian drone taking out a Russian Buk air defense system. So you see this drone coming in here, and then typical of air defense, this big fireworks display, and then we get a second angle here, and as more cooks off in this tree line around the forest, and that system destroyed, and then secondaries here as well. Then we have more footage yesterday from then Odessa. We know that the Novaya Pochta warehouse down here was hit, logistics, mailing, but we don't know exactly what was in those warehouses. We know those warehouses were actually hit back in 2023 as well by Russia, but we have more footage here showing these strikes. You can see this has just started here, and then we get a second strike, large strike there, said to be hit by Iskander's, of course, ballistic missiles with a large payload on board of those. So let's talk about Macron. As we know, Macron, French president, said he's not ruled out sending ground troops, and he's just come out with this today. If the Russians were able to, he's just come out with this today. If the Russians were to break through the front lines, if there were a Ukrainian request, which is not the case today, we would legitimately have to ask ourselves this question about would we send troops? Saying further, absolutely. As I said, I'm not ruling anything out because we are facing someone who is not ruling anything out. I have a clear strategic objective. Russia cannot win in Ukraine. Now, could Russia supply a lot more arms, money to Ukraine? Yes. Have they talked about soldiers going in? Yes. Has NATO had any real support of this? No, not from what I've seen at all. Would these be frontline troops, third line troops, rear echelon troops? We don't know. Does this completely change the war? Absolutely. If this happened, I don't think Macron has any plans to do this, especially without NATO's backing. I think this is more a political game to try and get more support as other things. If Russia wins in Ukraine, there will be no security in Europe. Who can pretend that Russia will stop there? What security will be there for the other neighboring countries? Moldova, Romania, Poland, Lithuania, and others. Well, with the exception of Moldova, the security is NATO and the EU, and Russia has, in my opinion, not actually shown, at least for Romania, Poland, Lithuania, that they have the ability to actually go in and do that. Like people say, oh, they won't stop in Poland and go to Berlin. Looking at Russia now and what is happening in Ukraine, do you actually think that Russia will be able to push through Romania or Poland or Lithuania, a NATO country, and make it to Berlin? It's unrealistic, but we keep seeing this pushed because it is a way to rally up more support. Moldova is different with the area of Transnistria as well, and we've spoken in length about this. But what do you think? Do you think it's a political thing from Macron, or who has declining popularity, or do you think that he's being legit? Now, let's talk about this Swiss peace conference and how it will definitely not involve Russia and may not involve China. Well, so we have some dates for this today, and we'll talk through some of these. So it's been held, was going to be held on the 15th and 16th of June, held at this Bergenstock resort. This is a 5-star resort in Lake Lucerne in central Switzerland. It would be beautiful. 160 national delegations. I will go as a 161st delegation if you would like. I'll go for a dip in the cold water. Russia, the aggressor in the ongoing war, will not be invited, says the Swiss government. But at this stage, we know the Swiss have said that Russia eventually needs to be here. Down here, a peace process with Russia is not possible without Russia. Apologies. misspoke. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba justified the decision not to invite Russia in a comment for the Foreign Policy magazine, saying, "Our approach comes from reality and from the experience that we have gained between 2014 and 2022. We had almost 200 rounds of talks with Russia in different formats with mediators and bilaterally. But nothing worked. It ended up in large-scale invasion." It's because it was never actually found of where the happy medium was, signs, and of course breaking things as well. But we know at some point there has to be a peace process. Regardless of where the front line ends, there will be a peace process, and it has to involve Russia at some point. Now, continuing on from this, and this is exactly what he actually said, which we want to look at what was actually said. I know some people hate me reading through these things, but it's bloody important to get a real idea of what was actually said. Switzerland is holding a high-level peace conference next month. Your Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, described Switzerland as openly hostile. What is the point of a peace summit without the party that initiated the war? Now, before we get into Kuleba's answer, what I will say is Russia and many others has criticised this summit as being nothing more than a platform for Ukraine to ask for more weapons and support rather than a peace conference. And that has been the criticism, saying if Russia's not there, it's a platform for Ukraine to talk about the 10-point peace plan, which Russia is saying is not going to happen with what is happening here, of giving back all the territory, and the front line's not showing that that may be realistic either, that it's just a platform for we need more to defeat Russia that's going to step into Europe and Poland, like Macron is saying at some point. But Kuleba says, your point is valid if you address the war that Russia launched against Ukraine with textbook diplomacy, because all textbooks that we learned from tell us that you need two parties to sit down and negotiate. Our approach comes from reality and from the experience that we gained between here and here, which we've spoken about with these different talks, but nothing worked. It ended up in the large-scale invasion of 2022. So, we know that it doesn't make sense to have Russia at the table if you cannot ensure that they act in good faith. There are only two ways to bring Russia to a situation where it will act in good faith. The first one is success on the battlefield, and the second one is having a coalition of countries who share the same principles and the same approaches. So this is why the summit does not intend to have Russia as a participant, because the goal of the summit is to unite countries who share principles and approaches that will build further actions on. The second one of the coalition of countries, in which you can get North Korea, Iran, China, a host of other countries as well, which are not going to have that flip. I guess good luck. And of course, winning on the battlefield, this is what we're being told more and more. And the longer the war goes on, the more that Russia and Ukraine dig in, I think the less and less likely all-out success for either Russia or Ukraine as far as moving the borders one way or the other is becoming less likely. After that, communication with Russia may take place, and Russia can be part of the talks, because you are right. In the end, you cannot put the war to an end without both parties. So at the end, acknowledging at some point both parties need to be there. Now, China at this conference. We know that China stands to benefit probably the most of any country from this war. And from here we have Andrew Yermak, the head of the presidential office, said China still hasn't agreed to participate in the peace summit. We are constantly holding consultations at various levels with our partners. We will do everything to ensure that China is present. In my opinion, if Russia and China are not going to be there at two members of Permanent Security Council at this meeting, then it's nothing more than a hand shandy-a-thon, and don't worry about running the meter. If Russia's not there, whatever, if China's not there, when you speak about we need a coalition of countries, blah, 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 you may as well just say, well, we've already got the coalition of all the Western countries and Japan and Australia and whatever. We need China. We need to swing China, because China is supplying support to Russia. They have a lot to gain from this war. That China, they're the real swing that could happen in support of this war. Now, let's look at what Dmitry Peskov, of course, Kremlin spokesman, has said. We don't understand what the kind of milestone it is, the peace conference. What kind of conference can we talk about? What kind of serious conference with serious expectations of some sort of results without the participation of Russia? Now, this wasn't said today. This was said a couple of weeks ago. This is completely impossible. It is clear that some kind of initiative that is not focused on results. But the results, like Ukraine said, is trying to bring people together and, of course, trying to get more support into Ukraine. And this is what Zelensky has said. The peace summit is a global summit these days, together with Switzerland. We have finalised the invitations to the summit. The specific dates of the summit are this. We understand that only global power can force Russia to peace, and that's why we are working to attract as many participants as possible to the summit in Switzerland and the corresponding communication. We also have to understand that Putin will try and disrupt this work and our efforts by various manipulations and by the force of his terrorist strikes. We'll try and weaken Ukraine's position, all the positions on the battlefield, in diplomacy and the informational sphere. Must be equally strong now in order for us to exert pressure and bring our results closer. I thank each and everyone in Ukraine. I thank everyone who is fighting, as he usually signs off. My opinion, if China and Russia aren't there, I think you're pushing shit uphill personally. China is absolutely critical in where this war goes, how this war can be continued by Russia, and what China has to benefit from the major powers, let's just say NATO and Russia, having a war with them supplying, China being them, supplying very little weapons. So they've got all their stocks, 0 soldiers. It is very, very beneficial for China of what is happening here, and don't think that they're not watching and seeing what is happening and seeing the West's reaction to Russia also going into Ukraine. I mean, well, they're not deploying troops. Maybe Taiwan, maybe this, maybe we'll move up somewhere. If Russia gets weakened, maybe we'll do it up north. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but China is where I think the war needs to be won on the diplomatic front here as well. Now let's have a look at the maps before I show you some footage, and I will stop talking. Here we have Ukraine, the centre, the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied since 22. The purple since 2014. Here we have the Donetsk Oblast, and we'll come down the front line where you've been wanting to have a look in this Osheretny-Keremek front, of course, just to the northwest of Avdiivka. And you can see the change today, doing what we said yesterday and closing up this gap in here. Now, what this is doing, every time we see that this, let's step back. Every time we see that this gap here gets closed up and up and up, including out to the west of Solovov, what we know is the risk of then cutting off this for the counterattack is getting less and less and less to today. Now, let's have a measurement of this. I was a bit short on that. 800 meters. Effectively, this will have been cut off through here. I don't believe there'd be any Ukrainian troops left down in here. And if they were, getting out through here would be a bloody nightmare with the ground and how it sits here. Potentially, I don't know. By tomorrow, I believe we'll see this cut off, if not already here. So this is expanding that control, ballooning out and doing the opposite of what everyone or the commentators online said. And well, this will have a counterattack and cut off, and you'll have all the Russians then stuck out in here. Again, you need to continue, never underestimate your enemy. Things go wrong when that starts to creep in, which has been a constant in this entire war. Russia underestimated Ukraine and NATO and support, and we have underestimated Russia's ability to maintain the economy and make bloody weapons and adapt and change on the battlefield. Anyway, and our experience should have shown that we're idiots for thinking that. Now, let's have a look at where these maps are sitting. So this is Osheretny, this dot down here. This is Keremek, and this is the place that I cannot pronounce. So as you can see, that it is showing that Russia has pushed a fair bit more north than this map is showing. Well, at least it's showing that it's right across here and has cut all of this off. So a few more tens of square kilometers, I would say that this is showing, although it would show very similar if this was cut off here and not just grey zone. But situation north of Avdiivka, Russian army made new advances between Keremek and there, where troops control 60% of the locality. Clash with Ukrainian army are taking place north and northwest of Osheretny, as well as we haven't seen any change down here from Solovov. We know Russia tried to push down the train line and road here, the road here out towards Sokil as well. So interesting update of what we're actually seeing then there. Now we have one more change on this map, and it's right up in the northeast in here of then Kislivka. Now, what we know is Russia has been making advancements out here, and the north is where everyone is saying that things could start really going downhill. Sorry, I just want to get that back up. Because of the northern group, the amount of soldiers Russia has announced here, and across from Kursk, Belgrade, somewhere in here will draw Ukrainian forces away. thing is the risk of this happening has the same effect as well. But in here, Russia has made then ground again out into this other town. Of course, Kislivka still comes out of here, and let's have a look. NOAA Reports has then this map here today showing in similar area as just down to here, but more cutting down through. So if we see where this reservoir pond is here, right here, so up from more like here through. Either way, we know maps are changing in the same general direction. Now, on this map, there's no other movements that are happening. I'll just show you here. So we saw that the other day, nothing in Bakhmut, although we know the fighting is very, very fierce in Bakhmut. Then no change down in Uruzani, where we have seen over the past few days, but Syriac has an update in here as well, saying that Russia has advanced in this region then again. Now, one thing I did say yesterday was I said that MOD Deep State Map was showing more Russian movement than it showed on Syriac. So this has, in my opinion, just caught up. See where it's coming out, where this creek bends around to the left, same area, as well as the same buildings here. So Syriac has really just caught up to this, advancing south of Ruzani. Evermost warehouses scoop part of the eastern shore of the river. So trying to push back up through Ruzani and trying to get where Ukraine had pushed down on their spring offensive, counter-offensive actions. So let's have a look over the claims of everything. So the news of the Russian capture of Paraskovskia is like the news of the complete Russian capture of Ntalove. They make no sense and are only intended to add the idea of Ukrainian collapse in the Donbass that some accounts want to defend. So I'll just show you where these areas are first, and we'll talk about it. So where we're looking at, we're going to come into this Pervomaysky front. Ntalove, of course, hasn't formed, but we do know there's a Russian troop presence in here. And then we come down Novomylivka outside of here. Then we have this Paraskovskia here. Now, what this is trying to do is show that the front line has a complete collapse and it's all falling apart, which Russia is making ground. There are areas collapsing. Has the front line fully collapsed? No. A front line fully collapsed, regardless of what my titles and thumbnails will say, will look like this over a week, which this is just not going to do that. Although we do know with movements that it could move very, very slow and very, very quick. We spoke about that with Ukraine's offensive. That never happened, but we could see that happen somewhere as well, like with Avdiivka. You know, meter by meter by meter, weeks and months and years, and then 20 Ks or 10 Ks in a couple of weeks. It is more accurate to speak of the acceleration and deterioration of the Ukrainian armed force. Regarding Paraskovskia, the capture of Novomylivka allows a direct assault on the other locality from the east. However, it is possible that the Russian force will continue to press somewhat harder from the south and north before an assault. Artillery has shelled the settlement heavily in recent days, indicating that the situation on the front will soon become clearer. So what they're saying is here is everyone is thinking that Russia is going to come in from the east. It seems the most clear from this map, but could they want to come further down from the south as the artillery is hitting this location? I'm not a general. I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse of a bloody general either. So we will see exactly what is happening there. But we do know that information campaigns will always take advantage of what they can. Like when we saw that Ukraine started making some ground down near, or Robertini front, Oroki front, the whole front lines collapsed. I'm probably guilty of trying to do it myself because we're on bloody media. We have to have our titles and thumbnails and shit say that, or else you get bloody nowhere. But same as with this as well. Anyway, legends, enjoy the next part of this video. Let me know what you think, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, have a great weekend.
We'll start with the reason, and this really was the reason why I spoke to you some time ago and said it's probably worth a follow-on, is because of these claims, and there are numerous claims on both sides about the use of chemical weapons, and people throwing weird things around about this isn't a chemical weapon, this is, and what it all means. So I thought it'd be good. Let's just look at the scope of what is being claimed. And it really is both sides accusing the other side of breaching the CWC. And we'll get into what is the CWC, what some of the definitions are, who signed up to it in a similar way that we looked at the Ottawa Treaty. We'll do a bit of a cursory look at, is there any evidence to suggest that chemical weapons are being used? And then, like we've done with all the other stuff, we'll just spitball some ramifications and things like that. OPCW is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. So they are the owners per se of the CWC, which is the Chemical Weapons Convention. This all came about because of World War I, all the use of phosgene, chlorine, and all these other horrible chemicals. They came up with this protocol and said, hey, look, let's not allow this to be done in any future conflict. Fast forward to 1997, or the 90s really, and they did enough back and forward with enough countries that they came up with the CWC. So that's what exists today. The CWC is a convention for the prohibition of the development, production, and stockpiling, as well as the use of chemical weapons, and on the destruction of any existing chemical weapons. It's got a preamble, 24 articles, and 3 annexes. According to OPCW, 193 states are committed, and 100% of declared stockpiles by possessor states have been verifiably destroyed. That's the update as of the end of 2023.
Because am I correct in saying that America destroyed the last of their stockpiles only last year?
I think so, something like that. Russia apparently claimed, I think it was 2017. So there's lots of who knows what's going on.
With a sense of plausible deniability around things.
They just say, well, it wasn't us that used Novichok, so because we don't have chemical weapons.
Yeah, right.
So what are you gonna argue about that one? So Article 1B states never. This is like the Ottawa Treaty. Never under any circumstances to use chemical weapons. Black and white. Article 5 states that riot control agents, of which we'll define shortly, cannot be used as a method of warfare. So we'll get into a little bit about what does that actually mean and all the rest of it. Now, under this convention, law enforcement use of riot control agents is okay. So crowd control and things like that. That's your tear gases and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Now, it's important to note in one of the 3 annexes, they have a clear list of different chemicals, and it's all your usual suspects. VX, sarin, soman, tabin, all these old school hardcore chemical warfare agents. In Annex B, Schedule 3, there's a list of toxic chemicals. There's 4 of them. Very specifically, chloropicrin is stated, and that'll become important later when we get into why we've raised that. OPCW, or the CWC, defines a chemical weapon as a toxic chemical, blah, blah, blah. So what does a toxic chemical mean? Toxic chemical is something that's designed to cause death, temporary incapacitation, or permanent harm to animals or humans. So it's pretty clear, right? And riot control agents would definitely, under this convention, be classed as a toxic chemical, therefore a chemical weapon.
Yep.
Now, both Russia and the Ukraine have signed up to the CWC. They both signed in 1993 when it came out, and they both ratified within a year or so of it coming into effect. So it entered into force in April of 1997. Russia ratified, they ascended in November of 97, and Ukraine ascended in October of 98. So signing up means you're under no legal obligation to do anything, but there's a sort of obligation that you're not going to do anything before ratification that's going to affect the purpose of the treaty. And ratify means it's a formal act where you consent to become bound by the treaty upon its entry into force. So both Russia and Ukraine have signed and ascended. So they're both fully bound by the CWC. Now, riot control agents are defined, if you look on the OPCW's website, any chemical not listed in the schedule that can produce rapidly inhuman sensory irritation or disabling physical effects, which disappear within a short time following termination of exposure. So it's pretty clear what a riot control agent is. So just to circle back, Article 1 of the CWC, every party that signs up for this thing, that's ratified their commitment to this, cannot use riot control agents as a method of warfare. It's black and white, absolutely crystal clear. Where this all kicked off was picking up reporting, and there's been reporting over 2 years now since the invasion, of the use of these in particular. So this is the K-51 RG stands for riot grenade. Developed by the Soviets in the 70s, been around forever. Basically, a pyrotechnic process starts burning inside the grenade, builds up a lot of gas, which is aerosolized powder, and it blasts a hole through the bottom of the grenade and spits out very, very hot aerosolized powder. Now, apparently, the K-51s contain chloropicrin, which is that one that we highlighted on the CWC's list. They're designed for use in confined spaces up to 400 square meters. So that's a lot of volume of gas that they release. The CWC says chloropicrin is considered a lung damaging agent. It's in agriculture, they use it to fumigate soil. Very powerful irritant, similar characteristics to tear gas. So chloropicrin, the K-51, would most certainly fall into the definition of riot control agent. Looking at some of these claims, where it kicked off for me in terms of interest in where and how have these been used is there are a lot of cases of these being reported in December, just gone, of K-51s being deployed. So tear gas isn't a gas per se, it's heated up aerosolized powder. It's designed for short term, etc. And these are sort of the typical symptoms that you might see: coughing, involuntary closure of the eyes, tear ducts being activated, all the rest of it. So there's a very distinct difference between that and involuntary twitching, which is like a nerve agent style attack, or some of the other ones have very characteristic effects. So tear gas is short term, and it's pretty clear to see when it's a tear gas riot control agent versus a lethal nerve agent, etc.
Well, and anyone who's done CBR and training in the military knows exactly what it's like to be hit with CS gas. So when you do training in the military, as you know bloody better than I, you will get, for your training for chemical warfare environments, you will get taken into a tent with a small amount of CS gas, and to double check that all you know how to purge your mask correctly and seal everything correctly. And it is a very, very weird sensation when you take your mask off. It gets in your eyes and your lungs and whatever. It's a bloody horrible thing.
Oh, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
It does keep, and it can reignite bloody an hour on in your getting a hot shower too.
Horrible stuff.
Yeah.
So let's circle right back, and I started to go down this rabbit hole of K-51 use, and there it's heaps of it on both sides. The earliest I found in the time I had to do this research, and there might be other examples around this time, is video footage, and you can see some of this is on RT, so a public network, showing these crates of the K-51. So this is right back when Russia had stationed forces prior to the full-scale invasion in 2015. Pretty clear example. No, I couldn't really find anything of them being used until you get to around 2022. Excuse me. And there are lots of examples through 2022. So this one clearly shows Russians affixing a K-51 to this drone. And there's been a couple of examples where the Ukrainians are like, hey, we've recovered Russian drones that were dropping K-51. So this is back in 2022. There are other tweets and posts and Telegram messages of K-51s being used against the Ukrainians by the Russians. So you can see here that he's going to fly his drone up. He's going to drop this K-51 into, assuming this is a Ukrainian position, he's going to drop this into a bunker or wherever they're hiding out in a bombed out house. And the K-51 releases enough gas, causes the irritation, assuming these guys don't have gas masks, and it's going to force them to evacuate. So it's not lethal. This is designed to force the evacuation, and we'll get into why you would use this on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So we'll watch there. You can start to see now there wasn't an explosion. There wasn't any flame or any fragmentation or blast effect that was clearly observable, but you can see this thick white smoke. Now, is that obscuration smoke? Is it chloropicrin? Is it something else? I don't know. There's no way to tell unless you were to test the area immediately after. There's no real way that you can figure out what that is. But we will see, I don't know if it's already passed, but you do see the guys legging it to get away from that gas.
Yeah.
Might be on one of the other videos that we've got shortly after. Now, this is from October of 2022. This is a Telegram channel where you see an American-speaking foreign fighter fighting on the side of the Ukraine. And as he pans around his room, you can clearly see what looks like K-51
Yeah, 100%.
Grenades sitting on his
He's
bench top
stockpiling
there.
oil filters. Yeah. K-51 grenades.
In December of 22, the Ukrainian Navy asserted that a lot of these chloropicrin grenades were being dropped from drones by the Russians onto Ukrainian positions, and that they had to carry out protective actions, including putting on gas masks as a result. You've got a one from the other side now. So this is January of last year, 2023. And I remember you said you saw this one. When this came out, I did a lot of research and I asked a lot of people, never really got an answer what this is. So they appear to be kamikaze style FPVs, and they've got these tubes. Now, these tubes could be anything. They could be explosive. They could be, survey beacons. They could be a raft of things. But when he gets into the freezer in a sec, it looks like there's some kind of chemical agent. And he does talk about the guy talking in the Telegram video, the Ukrainian, he does talk about chemicals. So what this is, I'm not sure. You can see a couple of explosive style payloads there, I think. But what these tubes are, what they're designed to do, I don't know. This top video, which I'll play now, is not that post, but it's something very similar to show, again, that this grenade that's being dropped is not pyrotechnic. It's not explosive. It's not a stun grenade. It's there specifically to release a riot control agent. So you'll see as the gas is built up, guys that are in that protected area can't handle that, obviously don't have gas masks, and like the person, Dave, that you just alluded to, they've got to just escape that gas. And the idea would be you flush guys out of protected areas where they can be targeted by other vectors. So there they go there. You can call in artillery, you can call in other drone attack platforms. Now, in April of last year, again, the Russian side this time started reporting that the Ukrainians had used a internally produced Ukrainian riot control agent, tear gas, on their drones to attack the Russians. October of last year, the Russians put out a big report claiming they made all these claims about Ukraine's use of toxic chemicals. And in December, the Ukrainians put out their version, right? Basically saying, hey, we've seen a huge ramp up of Russian attacks using these grenades and other chemicals. 4th of December, there's an example where they've recovered. So the Ukrainians are showing, hey, here's another example. The Russians are massively ramping up their use of these riot control agents.